When my ex's brother became my defender. Chapter When my first love, Jake, came back, he told me to disappear from his life. That night I burned every memento that tied me to him. Little did I know that when we met again, I had become the fiancé of his older brother, Alexander. In the private room of a fancy restaurant, Jake lost his composure instantly. His eyes were red with anger as he confronted me. "Didn't you say you'd love me forever?" The man sitting at the head of the table, Alexander, lowered his gaze expressionlessly and lit a cigarette. "If you have a death wish, go ahead, but leave my fiancé alone," he said coldly. When I pushed open the door of the private room, Jake was chatting animatedly with some friends. He glanced up and his face fell when he saw me. The others followed his gaze and recognized me. "Isn't that Jake's ex-girlfriend?" someone whispered. "The one who burned through of his money? The infamous troublemaker? It really is her. Why is she back? Is she trying to get back together with Jake?" Before Jake could even say a word, his friends were already coming to his defense, hurling insults at me. But I didn't care. I wasn't there for Jake anyway. I walked straight towards Alexander, who naturally extended his hand to me. I placed mine in his. "Let me introduce you all," Alexander said. "This is my fiancée, Ella." The two people who had insulted me earlier turned pale, their expressions a mix of embarrassment and fear as they avoided my gaze. Jake looked as if he'd been struck by lightning. He never expected that I would go from being his ex-girlfriend to his future sister-in-law. Everyone in their social circle knew that offending Jake might lead to a scolding or a fight, but offending Alexander was a whole different story. He was a man you didn't mess with if you valued your life. Alexander was known for his ruthlessness and his quiet, intimidating presence. When he openly introduced me as his fiancée after I'd been insulted, it was clear that the two who couldn't keep their mouths shut were in big trouble. The rest of the group immediately became cautious, showing me respect. Everyone except Jake, who sneered at me. "You think you're good enough to marry into our family?" he taunted. I didn't get angry. Compared to what he'd put me through 3 years ago, this was nothing. I simply smiled and replied, "If I'm not worthy, then who is?" "Amanda." Amanda was Jake's first love, the woman he'd secretly pined for even when we were together. When Amanda returned to the country, Jake wanted to break up with me but didn't want to be the bad guy. So, he used emotional manipulation to try to make me end the relationship. When I didn't give in, he humiliated me in public, accusing me of being a gold digger. And when I tried to defend myself, he told me to disappear from his life. I didn't disappear. Instead, that very night I burned everything that reminded me of him. Jake swore he'd find me, but he couldn't because I was with Alexander. And Alexander knew all about Jake's dirty deeds. The tense atmosphere in the room made everyone uncomfortable, except for Alexander and me. The ever-imposing Alexander, who sat like a king on his throne, even peeled a shrimp for me by hand. The way everyone looked at me became a mixture of fear and respect. What they didn't know was that Alexander hadn't planned to attend this dinner. Jake's friends weren't worth his time, but I wanted to come. I wanted to settle the score from 3 years ago. After having 2 glasses of wine, I felt a bit tipsy and leaned against Alexander's shoulder. Jake thought I was doing it on purpose to provoke him. After all, even after 3 years, he still hadn't won Amanda over. And how could a man stand both failure and provocation? Grimacing, he slammed his glass on the table. Someone beside him tried to calm him down, but Jake didn't care. He was always hot-tempered and self-centered. "Ella, what do you think you're doing?" he snapped. I looked up, genuinely confused. What's wrong? Maybe it was the alcohol or his overwhelming anger, but Jake's eyes were red as he mocked me. "Didn't you say you'd love me forever?" "Did I? I don't remember," I replied. Even if I did, I was young and couldn't tell the difference between a real man and a boy back then. Jake got even angrier and stood up, walking towards me as if he was about to lay hands on me. Suddenly, the click of Alexander lighting a cigarette broke the tension. His face remained expressionless as he said calmly, "If you want to die, go ahead, but stop bothering my fiancé." Changing the title from fiancé to wife was a clear warning to Jake. If he continued to harass me, Alexander would deal with him personally. Alexander and I left first, leaving Jake seething with rage. In the car, I thanked him. "Thank you, Alexander. Thanks for standing up for me. Alexander's expression remained calm, but his eyes were deep and unreadable. In truth, our relationship was nothing more than a transaction. After all, Jake was his younger brother. I was genuinely grateful that he had embarrassed Jake in public to defend me. I turned to the driver and said, "Pull over at the next intersection. I'll get off there." Before the driver could respond, Alexander suddenly grabbed my wrist and pulled me towards him. I stumbled into his arms. "Ella, do you want to come home with me tonight? Jake will definitely come to question me," he said. "Does that mean we'd share a room?" I asked. "It's up to you. If we want to make this more convincing, then yes," he replied. Just as Alexander predicted, we hadn't been back at the family estate for long when Jake came pounding on the door. Alexander went to open it, his expression grim. Jake, still angry, forgot his usual fear of Alexander. "Is Ella here? Did you bring her back?" he demanded. Alexander glanced towards the bathroom. I had just finished showering and walked out. "What's going on?" I asked. Jake's expression turned murderous. "Ella, have you forgotten how pathetically you chased after me? How dare you seduce my brother now?" Before Jake could finish, Alexander pulled me into his arms. "I'm the one who seduced Ella," he interrupted. Sensing my shock, he held me even closer. "Brother, have you lost your mind? She's just a gold digger," Jake shouted. Before he could say more, Alexander slammed the door in his face. Then he pinned me against the door. "Will you keep acting along?" he asked. My body tensed and my face grew hot. People always said Alexander was handsome but uninterested in women. But at that moment, with his face so close and his arm around my waist, the air was charged with tension. Outside the door, Jake was yelling, "Ella, I will never let you into this family." But right then it felt like Alexander was truly the one seducing me. Our breathing grew ragged as our kiss deepened. Soft, intimate sounds filled the air, even reaching outside the door. Jake, unable to contain his anger, banged on the door. I flinched, but Alexander wrapped his arms tightly around me. "Don't be afraid. He won't dare break the door down," he chuckled. With Alexander protecting me, Jake couldn't touch me. But I wondered, when this arrangement was over, would Alexander still shield me? "Alexander," I murmured hesitantly. "Don't be so formal. Call me by my name," he whispered, his lips brushing my ear. "Alexander," I said again. He replied, his deep voice sending shivers down my spine. In this charged atmosphere, I felt weak in the knees. "Can we add one more condition to our agreement?" I asked, my voice barely above a whisper. "Sure," he answered without hesitation, even though I hadn't told him what I wanted to add yet. I wondered if men always made promises so easily before fully committing. Just as I was about to push him away, Alexander suddenly stepped back, creating some distance between us. I looked up at him in surprise. He tilted his chin towards the door. "He's gone," he said, referring to Jake. I could hear Jake's footsteps fading away, though his angry muttering continued for a while. Once the noise outside disappeared, Alexander said, "I'll sleep on the couch tonight." "Oh," I blurted out, surprised. He turned to look at me, a faint smile on his lips. "What? Did you have something else in mind?" I didn't, but I felt guilty. After all, I was the one who had asked him to help me with this act. Yet I had started to doubt his intentions halfway through. Trying to make up for it, I quickly said, "We can share the bed. I'm sure you won't do anything." I thought he would refuse, but to my surprise, he agreed immediately. "All right." Why did I suddenly feel like he had been waiting for me to suggest that? Was it just my imagination? The next morning, Jake was waiting for me on the couch. He had sworn I would never be allowed into his family, and it seemed he was doing everything to make that happen. When he saw me, he tossed a stack of photos onto the coffee table with a sneer. "Take a look," he said. They were photos the paparazzi had taken during our relationship. I had always wondered why no one outside of his close circle knew about us, especially since Alexander was a prominent figure. Now I knew why. Jake had bought all the photos to keep our relationship a secret. He never imagined that one day, those same photos would be used to blackmail me. "Break up with my brother right now, or I'll send these to every tabloid," he threatened. "And then what?" I leaned forward, picked up one of the photos, glanced at it, and tossed it back onto the table. My indifference only made Jake angrier. He grabbed the photos and threw them in my face, the edges scraping my skin. Do you think my family will ever let you marry in? You were with me first and now you're with my brother. My parents will never accept you. I raised my hand to my face. The pain was minor, but the humiliation stung. He seemed to forget that he had never even told his parents about us, and he was the one who had betrayed me. So what right did he have to order me around? I raised my hand and slapped him across the face. The sound echoed in the room. Jake was stunned. When he came to his senses, he raised his hand to hit me. I knew if he did, especially in his home, I would have no way to defend myself. So I turned and ran, but I collided with a solid chest. It was Alexander. Chapter at around a.m. Alexander had received an urgent call and rushed out, saying he needed to handle an emergency. I didn't expect him to come back. His life was busy and I thought he would go straight to work. But he not only returned but did so just in time. Alexander, I cried, clinging to his sleeve. He looked down at me, and the coldness in his eyes softened. My heart skipped a beat at this unfamiliar look. Alexander gently ruffled my hair, then looked up at Jake, who still had his hand raised. What do you think you're doing? He asked, his voice calm but menacing. It was like a heavy weight pressing down on Jake, forcing him to lower his hand. Still, Jake stubbornly retorted. She's nothing. How dare she hit me? Because she's mine, Alexander said, his eyes fixed on the red marks on my face. There was a hint of tenderness in his gaze that took me by surprise. I didn't know why Alexander had said those words, but I couldn't resist this blatant show of favoritism. At that moment I realized that our so-called transaction had changed. I had fallen for him. But as Jake had said, how could someone like me ever fit into his wealthy family? Chapter as Alexander led me away, someone took a photo of us. I thought he hadn't noticed, so I whispered, "Do you want me to stop them? If this picture spreads, it will cause a huge scandal." Alexander only shrugged. Let them. I'm curious what it's like to be on the front page of a tabloid. I looked at him confused. He raised an eyebrow. What? Do you mind being in the headlines with me? It's not that. I'm just worried. Don't worry. I already called my parents this morning. What? Don't overthink it. Everything's taken care of. I stared at him, amazed at how he could make me feel so at ease. With him it felt like nothing could go wrong. But I reminded myself of the truth. Alexander had only approached me because of his father's illness, and our agreement stated that he could end things whenever he wanted. I was just a temporary part of his life. How could I even hope for more? Chapter that morning, news of the photo of Alexander and me spread like wildfire. To my surprise, the first person to call me wasn't a journalist but Jake. Ella, you must be feeling pretty proud of yourself, huh? He sneered over the phone. Jake had gone to great lengths to keep our relationship a secret, but now Alexander was letting the news spread without a care. Even though my relationship with Alexander was fake, the contrast was satisfying. Why wouldn't I be? Once I marry your brother, you'll have to call me sister-in-law, I replied coolly. You're dreaming, Jake shouted, repeating it like a broken record before hanging up. I didn't think much of it, but that night Jake, reeking of alcohol, showed up at my doorstep. I later learned that he had gone to see Amanda and they'd had a huge fight. Unlike me, Amanda didn't put up with his spoiled behavior. She not only argued with him but also embarrassed him in public. Suddenly, Jake started to miss how well I had treated him. Seeing me, the woman he had discarded, now in the spotlight with his brother, looking so happy, made him bitter. Ella, I'll give you a chance to come back to me, he slurred. I didn't want it. My expression remained blank. Enraged, he snapped. Have you forgotten how you used to beg me? Do you want me to post those love letters you sent me? Go ahead, I replied unfazed. Jake was shocked by my indifference, but I truly didn't care anymore. I was just relieved that my relationship with Alexander wasn't real. Otherwise, I would feel even more humiliated in front of him. Chapter true to his word, Jake posted one of my old love letters online. But the very next night, just as it started to gain attention, it mysteriously disappeared. And any mention of our names became impossible to post. I was confused when Alexander called me. His voice was unusually deep. Come downstairs. You're outside. I asked. Yes. His tone was short, almost as if nothing was wrong, but I could sense a hint of anger. Was he upset about the love letter? Even though Jake had caused the trouble, the words were mine, and they showed my most vulnerable feelings. I asked cautiously, Is something wrong? Come down, he repeated firmly. I had no choice but to agree. Okay, I'm coming. It had started to drizzle. The soft rain glowed under the streetlights, creating a hazy atmosphere. Alexander's car was parked outside. As I approached, he turned to look at me and our eyes met. My heart started to race. I thought to myself, is it really that hard to hide your feelings once they've developed? I reached the car and asked softly, Why did you call me so late? Before he answered, the car door clicked open, and he gestured for me to get in. Where are we going? I was confused. Our agreement didn't include late-night meetings like this. For the past 3 years, Alexander rarely contacted me at night without notice, and I wasn't eager to be alone with him, afraid he would bring up the love letter. I'm feeling a bit tired. So if it's not important, I started to say, but he pushed the door open wider and insisted I get in. I couldn't refuse. It wasn't until we passed the third intersection that I realized we were heading to Alexander's place. The rain had gotten heavier, and the windshield wipers started moving. The partition between the front and back seats rose, separating us from the driver. I could tell he was about to say something, but instead of words, his lips met mine. This kiss was different from the one at his house. It was fierce like a wild animal's, as if something had really set him off. My breathing became rapid, matching the intensity of his kiss. The rain outside seemed to drown out everything. Alexander, I whispered. Call me by my name, he said, tightening his hold on me. Alexander, you're hurting me. I'm jealous, he replied. Just then a car horn blared, interrupting him. I didn't catch everything he said, but his eyes were dark, filled with complex emotions. Before I could ask, the car stopped suddenly. Alexander quickly wrapped his arms around me and pressed the partition button. The driver turned around, alarmed. Boss, it's Jake's car. When my ex's brother became my Defender chapter, it turned out that Jake had gone to my apartment but arrived too late. He saw me get into Alexander's car and followed us. Finally, he blocked the car, parking his vehicle diagonally in front of us without caring about the traffic. Jake stood by the window, knocking loudly. Ella, get out, he shouted, his voice angry even over the sound of the rain. 3 years after our breakup, and now as his supposed future sister-in-law, he still dared to talk to me like that. I glanced at Alexander, who calmly said, Stay in the car. Alexander stepped out, and the driver hurriedly followed, holding an umbrella over him. Jake stood alone in the rain, his eyes blazing with fury. Brother, you can have any woman you want. Why do you have to take her from me? He roared. Alexander gave him a cold stare. When she was with you, I never interfered. But now she's mine, and you'd better accept that. What? Jake looked stunned. Then his face contorted with realization. You wanted her all along. This was premeditated. Alexander didn't respond, his steely expression speaking volumes. Over the years, Jake had dated countless women, and as long as he didn't introduce them to their parents, no one paid much attention. The fact that Alexander was taking a stand for me clearly meant his feelings were serious. However, Jake couldn't fathom that Alexander could actually have romantic feelings for me. Feeling betrayed and enraged, Jake suddenly lunged forward and punched Alexander right in the mouth. The driver froze in shock, waving his free hand desperately as if trying to shield Alexander. But Alexander calmly pushed him aside. Having held a high-powered position for years, everyone was used to seeing Alexander as composed and dignified. They were unaware that he could turn physical when pushed too far. With a swift kick, Alexander sent Jake flying. The driver was petrified, his eyes wide with disbelief. Jake landed hard on the wet pavement, his face twisted in pain as he let out a string of curses. He tried to get up but could only manage to kneel on one leg. Alexander walked up to him, towering over his fallen form. How do you want to die? He asked icily. The rain continued to pour, soaking them both, but Alexander still exuded an intimidating aura, seemingly unaffected by the downpour. In contrast, Jake looked like a drenched, defeated stray dog. He was no match for his elder brother. If he stopped this nonsense, he could still live the life of a carefree wealthy heir. Otherwise, being kicked out of the family was a very real possibility. Before getting back in the car, Alexander left Jake with a final warning. Pack your things and get out of the country tomorrow. Or else. He didn't need to finish the sentence. The look in his eyes said it all. Over the years, Jake had caused countless problems, and Alexander had always cleaned up his mess. Their parents were long fed up with Jake and didn't want to see him anymore. So for Jake, if Alexander no longer tolerated him, he had no choice but to leave. Chapter in the car, the driver handed Alexander a soft towel. Before he could reach for it, I grabbed it. Let me, I said. Alexander glanced at me, his expression unreadable, but his cold aura made the air in the car feel thick and tense. I gently dried his hair, trying several times to start a conversation to break the suffocating silence. But when I saw the cut on his lip, the words caught in my throat. Earlier, when Jake hit him, I had wanted to jump out of the car. After all, this whole mess started because of me. How could I just hide inside? But as if he had eyes in the back of his head, Alexander shot me a look as soon as I reached for the door, stopping me in my tracks. Now, every second in the car felt like an eternity, and I was sure the driver was just as uncomfortable as I was. When the car finally pulled into the garage, I heard the driver let out a relieved sigh. "Boss, we're here." Alexander opened the door and got out without so much as a glance at me. I wasn't sure if he was angry at Jake or at me. I quickly followed him into the house. He ignored the wound on his lip and headed straight for the bathroom. "Alexander," I called after him. "You should tend to your wound." "Leave it," he said without turning around. In that moment, I wasn't sure if it was my anxiety or sudden burst of frustration, but my voice rose. "If you're tired of me, just ask the driver to take me home." Alexander finally stopped walking but still didn't face me. "Didn't you hear what I said in the car?" he asked abruptly. I wasn't sure which part he meant, and I was too afraid to guess wrong and make him even angrier. In the heavy silence, he turned to look at me. "I said I'm jealous," he stated firmly. What?" I stammered. "You're jealous of me loving Jake?" His words were like a shockwave, shattering all my thoughts. Could it be? Seeing my stunned silence, Alexander gave a bitter smile and turned back towards the bathroom. Before he could close the door, I rushed over. He was startled, quickly pulling the door back to avoid catching my hand. "What are you doing?" "I need to talk to you," I said breathlessly. "Then talk," he replied curtly. Jake was my first love. I was young and naive back then. He introduced me to so many new things and I admired him. When he tried to break up with me using the silent treatment, I couldn't let go easily. I've always believed that love should be honest. If you love someone, you should show it. If not, be straightforward. There shouldn't be any manipulation. "What if I've been manipulating you?" he suddenly asked. Before this question, I had wondered countless times. Did he like me? Why else would he protect me at every turn and even fight his own brother for me? I wanted to ask him directly but was terrified of the answer. Afraid that it wouldn't be what I hoped for, and even more afraid that it would be. Someone like him deserved someone better. Someone more sophisticated. And Suddenly, a soft laugh escaped him. He sounded annoyed. "Didn't you say love should be honest? Are you only honest with him and hiding things from me?" I was overthinking," I mumbled. "You've always been so clear-cut in our deal." It was me who crossed the line. His disappointment was palpable. He didn't even bother closing the door, just turned away. The silence was deafening, broken only by the sound of the rain outside and the rapid thumping of my heart. I had been too obvious. With my recent looks and actions, someone as perceptive as him must have seen through my feelings. "Yes, I like you," I blurted out into the quiet room. Alexander turned around, and to my surprise, there was a hint of joy in his expression. I gathered my courage and asked, "And you? Do you?" "Isn't it obvious?" he interrupted. It seemed obvious now, but I had been too afraid to believe it. Even after confessing, the atmosphere remained awkward. I stood there, not knowing whether to back away or insist on tending to his wound. Alexander just stared at me, saying nothing. Finally, I couldn't stand the tension anymore. "Are you still going to take a shower, Alexander?" Chapter After I treated Alexander's wound, he opened up to me. He confessed that it was love at first sight when he saw me, but at that time I was with Jake. When he realized I was his brother's girlfriend, he decided not to pursue me. He also admitted that our encounter 3 years ago, after Jake and I broke up, wasn't a coincidence. He had deliberately made sure to be in my path. The agreement we had was just an excuse to keep me close, and he had shredded it right after. He wasn't sure if I had truly moved on from Jake, so he arranged that dinner gathering and let me know about it. On the surface, it seemed like he was helping me get back at Jake, but in reality, he wanted to see if I would rekindle my feelings for my ex. He had won that bet. When Jake tried to come back into my life, I felt nothing but disgust. But even so, I still couldn't believe that something real could happen between Alexander and me. His parents would surely never approve. The next day, Jake left the country as threatened. But just a few days later, Alexander's mother called, asking him to bring me to the family estate where his father was recovering. In the car, Alexander reassured me, "Don't worry about anything. I'll be with you." "What's going on?" I asked. "It's going to be quite an eventful day," he replied. I soon understood why. When we arrived, I realized that besides his parents, there were other relatives, and among them was the woman his parents had chosen for him, Olivia. It turned out that Jake had told her something before leaving, setting me up. Alexander was called to the study by his parents. As soon as they were gone, Olivia turned on me. "Miss Ella, I heard your family is quite ordinary. Don't you think you and Alexander will have nothing in common? Normal people usually get along just fine," I said with a pointed look. Her temper flared, and she stood up angrily. "What do you mean by that? Are you saying I'm not normal?" "I never said that. Don't get so worked up," I replied calmly, smiling sweetly. The more polite I was, the angrier she became. "Being good with words won't help you. With your background, you'll never be good enough for Alexander's family," she sneered. She spoke as if she was already part of the family. Just then, Alexander and his parents came downstairs. Alexander's expression darkened when he heard her. Olivia, thinking they were unhappy with me, happily went to link arms with Alexander's mother, but she subtly pulled away. Olivia froze, her face turning red with embarrassment. Alexander's mother didn't console her. Instead, she said, "Olivia, we have some family matters to discuss, and it's not appropriate for outsiders to stay. You won't be joining us for dinner." Olivia's lips trembled, and her eyes welled up with tears. I looked at Alexander, confused, silently asking what had changed. When we first arrived, his parents had been so warm to Olivia and distant towards me. How could their attitude shift so suddenly? Chapter At the dinner table, Alexander's mother kept urging me to eat more, and his father was also very friendly, even asking, "When do you two plan to get married?" I was taking a sip of soup, and his question caught me off guard, making me choke and cough violently. Alexander handed me a napkin and gently patted my back. His actions were so natural and caring, but I was panicked. Even though his parents' attitude had changed, I still didn't know why. Was it really okay for him to be so affectionate in front of them? I gave him a look, trying to signal him to be more reserved. Whether he misunderstood my look or was teasing me, he actually picked up some food and put it on my plate. "Eat more. You're too thin," he said. I was so embarrassed, practically burying my face in the bowl. Thankfully, after a while, they started discussing business matters. But they were talking about major company decisions right in front of me. Weren't they worried I might leak the information? All I could do was quietly eat, trying to make myself as small as possible, too scared to say a word. In the end, I ate way too much. Chapter On the way back, after much pestering, Alexander finally told me why his parents' attitude had changed so drastically. "My mother is a bit superstitious. She had someone read our birth charts, and it turned out they were a perfect match," he said with a mysterious smile. I knew there was more to it. Alexander took my hand and squeezed it gently. "In business, I never make a move unless I'm sure of success. I approach relationships the same way. 3 years ago, there was a major project I could have secured earlier, but I waited until you were by my side to sign the contract. There were also times when I faced difficulties at work. I had already figured out the solutions, but I made it seem like you were the key to the breakthroughs. After we got together, my father's health started to improve. So now my parents truly believe that you're a lucky charm for our family. Since a trusted spiritual advisor said so, they can't wait for us to get married. Aren't you afraid that if you delayed the project, you would lose it? I asked. I was confident in my plan, he replied. Then why weren't you confident about us? Because I saw how broken you were after your breakup with Jake. I wasn't sure if you could fully let go of him. When you first stayed with me, it was out of necessity, not love. So yes, I was a little scared. A man who was always in control, who never took risks without careful planning, admitted to being scared. I looked at him deeply, not knowing how to express my feelings. He had stood up for me, favored me, and paved the way for our relationship. All I had to do was walk forward with him. And yet, despite all he had done, he was still afraid that I didn't love him. A powerful man, but in love he was so cautious, filled with doubts and insecurities. I suddenly understood why, on the night Jake blocked our car, Alexander had insisted on hearing me confess my love. That old love letter had shaken him, making him jealous and insecure. In a relationship, expressing love was the most direct way to feel secure. I was glad I hadn't hesitated that night. In fact, I wanted to make my feelings even clearer. The past was behind me, and I had no intention of looking back. I used to be in pain because I couldn't understand why my sincerity hadn't been reciprocated. Now I knew that sincerity only truly matters when both people are sincere. Alexander had waited 3 years for me to move on. He had carefully removed every obstacle, step by step, to ensure his parents would accept me. He had shown his sincere love long before I did. From then on, I decided to love him with all my heart and soul.